Hello, I am Sarah from Homespun Childhood, and here at Homespun Childhood, I share all things homeschool, literacy, curriculum, and more. Today, we are going to explore the Recipe for Reading Foundational Reading Program and all its different components. So let's jump in. Okay, so in front of me here, I have the different components to Recipe for Reading. I have the manual, I have the workbooks, and I have the readers. We're going to go through each of these different components, starting with the manual. So let's move the other things out of the way. So Recipe for Reading is an Orton-Gillingham approach to teaching reading skills. It's published by Educators Publishing Services. These are the same folks that publish Explode the Code, and so you'll see a lot of similarities in their workbooks and in this program. So Recipe for Reading has been around for a long time. I think it was originally published in the early 1970s. They have decades of research and kind of proof that this is a solid program. This is a really affordable, no-frills foundational reading program. This this teacher guide here runs about $32 at Rainbow Resource. It's for K2. It's for all your foundational reading curricula. So you would not need to purchase another teacher manual for the next level. This is kind of it in terms of foundational reading. It's a smallish book. This is like, I don't know, 9 by 7. And it's just black and white. So this is like straightforward. We're going to get to the details. We're going to teach the lessons and we're going to move on with life. That said, it's really easy to use and implement. You don't have to go hunting for different things. It's straightforward and lined out for you. So let's jump in. So at the beginning of our book, we have this sequence chart. This is their scope and sequence. You can actually find little checklists on like pads of paper online where you can like check off skills. This is, designed for tutors and classroom instruction. And so you would have a little checklist for each child and kind of marking off where they are. As a homeschool parent or somebody working one-on-one with a student, you could just Xerox this and use this as your little checklist. So we move into the book. We have our preface here and our table of contents. Note that this table of contents does not include all the different components. This is kind of like the big ideas within each section. So for example, within consonant, vowel, consonant words, short vowels, we've got 20 pages worth of instructional material here. This goes all the way through syllabication and working with affixes and the spelling rules that apply to that. Section 1 gives us a breakdown of the program itself. So regardless of where you're going to start with the program based on your child's needs, you would still want to read this section. It goes into the research base and their methodology. We talk about how the reading brain works, prerequisites for success, skill development, an atmosphere for learning, and then we go into their technique. Recipe for Reading is a multisensory approach. It is following best practices from Orton-Gillingham methods. Okay, so we want to go through the different senses. It's really important to include these different visual, auditory, kinesthetic approaches and incorporate some writing into it so that we're getting those different senses activated while we're teaching. Introducing additional sounds, an approach for older students, and then we go into the program components. The program components can include this manual. You would want to have some sound cards. That would be for your visual drill, where you're holding the card, it has the phonogram on it, and your child is identifying it. You can make those or you can purchase them. We have the workbooks, we have the alphabet series books, we have the sequence charts, which is what I was referencing a minute ago, writing paper, and then teacher-made materials. And it talks a little bit about organizing your materials, how you can organize them in a file or binder system. We go into presenting the lessons and how we do the different components of the lessons, sentences for dictation, memory training, and then here is a nice little summary of the daily routine. So you are doing the same kind of skills each day in terms of what type of skill practice, but you're incorporating new sounds. We talk about independent reading, about dictation and children dictating stories and the parents writing them down and turning them into books. This is very, much honoring the child as a storyteller, even if they can't write that yet. Okay, and then we're going to jump into the program. So section 2 is going to be starting with consonant, vowel, consonant words, so CVC words, and these are using short vowels. So we start off with letter C. And again, this is following their scope and sequence over here. And it's going to have a little bit of phonemic awareness with alliteration at the beginning, then the auditory visual drill, and then a kinesthetic drill and a workbook page. Since this is the very beginning of the program, we don't have any other letters that we can blend C with, so the material is short. We will look at these workbook pages in a minute. And then we move into letter O, A, D, G, M, L, H, T, and then we get to our review. So these first few sets of lessons here, there's not a lot of components to it because we're just trying to get enough letters and sounds under our belt that we can actually blend them together. However, if you notice within each lesson here, here's D, we have our phonemic awareness, we have the auditory visual drill, we have the kinesthetic drill, and then we have some words for the student to read and write, decodable words based off of the letters that they've learned, which at this point are C, O, A, and D. And there are workbook pages for each of these letters. Once we have enough letters to really begin to work with, they have this review built in. Throughout Recipe for Reading, you will see review sections, which I really like, that we have those there to slow down and make sure that we have kind of mastered this skill set before moving on to the next one. So they have your, what to do for the review. You have your decodable words for reading and spelling. We have our decodable phrases and sentences for dictation and reading. So again, we're tying in that reading and writing connection. We know that when we tie writing to reading, it makes the reading stronger. So children should be learning how to decode the words, to take them apart, blend them back together to read, and how to encode, how to pull those sounds out to write them down to spell them at the same time. This is also the first time that we're pulling in a book from the alphabet series. So you will see on the bottom of each page, they have this little call out box for your supplementary materials. So your workbook pages and your alphabet series books. And then we continue on through the letters. With this program, because it does not have a lot of extra materials, you would need to be taking your decodable phrases and sentences and writing those onto paper or typing them up so that you had a decodable sentence sheet for your student or you had a decodable word sheet for your student. This allows you some flexibility, so if you need to use some of them or all of them, you can choose that on your own. You can do them in a notebook, you can type them up. There's lots of different ways to approach that, but the materials aren't provided separate for you. So you would have to provide those materials yourself. The content is here though, right? Then we continue on through. You'll notice that in Recipe for Reading, they do include digraphs from pretty early on. So we're learning the CH digraph here before we've even finished learning our vowels. And so that's just one thing to note that's different from some of the other programs. It's taught in the same way. We're still using decodable sentences and workbook pages, and we have a reader to help support that learning. So moving on through, let's see, we get down here. So after we've finished the digraphs and the alphabet, we have digraph review. So reviewing the consonant digraphs. And some fun practice for fun and practice. And then they have a review test or review tests for CVC words. So just kind of like checking to see that your student has mastered the skills before moving on. They have some different activities scattered throughout to help your child consolidate their skills. And then we move into 2-syllable compound words. And again, we're following that same format where we have decodable words for reading and spelling, sentences, and then some little fun things, little riddles. They include the workbook page and the alphabet series book. Also starting to do more of the rules now that we have all of the main phonograms under our belt. So the flaws rule, and then moving into section 3, where we're starting to work on syllabication. And they start with that by focusing on detached syllables first, and then practicing seeing how those detached syllables can be found inside of longer multisyllabic words. And then there's some review for the detached syllables. They go into teaching the different syllable division strategies. This is really important for really starting to tackle those longer multisyllabic words. And then again, following their same pattern of offering decodable words for spelling and reading, our sentences, and then fun and practice. And then they start to work on blends. I think it's interesting that they include some of the syllabication methods before really focusing on blends. A lot of children are going to be experiencing blends before they're experiencing longer words, but that's the program. So there you go. We've got our workbook pages and whatnot. Practicing more syllable division, and then starting to add in some different endings. And then we add in teaching the word study aspect of the suffix ed. I like that they include the sorts in here for the different sounds of ed. Then they work on magic E, and again, their pacing is a little bit different from other programs because we've already talked some about syllable division, and we've already tackled some longer words before bringing in the silent E at the end of the word. Okay, detached syllable, magic E. So again, we're really working on these longer words, and this is where I often recommend Recipe for Reading for students who have either gone through a program and maybe it didn't necessarily stick, or they need additional practice and review, or students who are older and maybe breezed through reading instruction, but now are needing to have holes filled for spelling and grammar and word study aspect, because you can move through this really quickly and really target the different areas that need targeting. We're talking about open and closed syllables here, dividing before the consonant. Okay. And then section 4, we're moving into vowel digraphs. They have some mnemonics for pointing out the spellings of words. We've got our magic squares. Okay. And then we have different spellings for the k sound and talking about kind of sorting that and the rule for that. Our R-controlled vowels, syllable division for R-controlled vowels. So syllable division is really kind of taught spread out as you might start to encounter it in words. And so when they're teaching the R-controlled vowels, they're also teaching syllable division for those R-controlled vowels. Then we have our diphthongs, consonant LE endings, and then the doubling rules, consonant endings, talking a little bit about some suffixes, ly as a suffix. I just really want you to be able to kind of see all of this, so we're just going to kind of keep flipping. Talking about y as a vowel. Y is actually usually a vowel, which is interesting that we talk about how it's sometimes a vowel. It's usually a vowel. And then section 5. Okay, so section 5, we're moving more into some of the rules for adding endings to words. Some suggested suffixes. There's really not a lot of word study in this program, but the end of it really starts to move you into that. So it's kind of a nice transition into leaving your foundational reading program and moving more into a asynchronous, grammar and word study and writing type program and spelling. And then we have our appendix. So the appendix has a pretest, kind of figuring out where to place. It has a syllabication overview, the different methods, the different patterns. Then we have an appendix of prefixes, roots, and suffixes. But this isn't really going to teach you the word study. It's not going to give you a scope and sequence for that. They also have cursive models in here. So if you are teaching foundational reading alongside cursive instead of print, this is a nice feature to have in your appendix. And then our glossary, and that is that. So this stack here are their workbooks. Their workbooks are, they start with a K workbook, which kindergarten maybe, but really this K workbook is intended to be if you're using this program from the beginning, or you have a child that needs more phonological awareness and additional practice before kind of jumping into the level 1 workbook. These are not numbered by grade level. So we have levels 1 through 8, and this is not going to be, an 8-year program. The workbooks are identified very clearly in the program. So let's look through some of them. So the K workbook here, again, it follows their scope and sequence. And this workbook is nice because it can be used even if you're not using this particular program. So if you're using a different foundational reading program like Logic of English, Pinwheels, and you need additional practice, this one is nice because you can jump into the lesson and it's going to be decodable because it's only going to include that particular sound. So, here we are with lesson 4, practicing D, and it's not including the C and the O and the A that the child would have already been taught in Recipe for Reading. It's just focusing on the letter D and practicing D and the different sounds. So we have some phonemic awareness here, and then identifying words that begin with the D sound. As you get further along in this workbook, there are some activities that might not be decodable depending on the program you're coming from. So this is an example of identifying the pictures and kind of trying to match the words. So for this activity, you identify the S, N, the beginning sounds, and then they blend the word to read it, and then they match it. My daughter really likes this particular activity. I wish there were more ways to do that than just this workbook. We move into the workbooks that are referenced in the manual. So here is level 1. Level 1 is going to cover lesson 1 through lesson 16. So not the entire alphabet. And then they're pretty much the same setup for each of the different lessons. So we have some phonemic awareness, we have some handwriting practice. It does include cursive. This could either be beneficial for you or it could get in the way. For my daughter in particular, she is like, ooh, let's do cursive. And then we spend like several minutes, debating whether we're going to practice the cursive even though she is not learning cursive, or if we're going to skip that and move on. They have identifying the sound, beginning sound, some more handwriting practice. But the lessons themselves are pretty much the same. As we get farther in, we can start working on more word level reading here. So drawing a line that match and writing the word and saying your sounds as you go. Reading the sentence and then checking the one that matches the picture. This looks very similar to Explode the Code. And again, that's because they're produced by the same publisher. So this is book level 1. We're going to look at level 2 really quick. The level 2 workbook is kind of finishing up section 1 where we're going through the remaining consonants and the digraphs. Level 3, we have working on the compound words, working on breaking up compound words. We have some reading involved with a picture, floss rule practice, more reading involved and writing. I like that they have some decodable passages within here, consonant blends. I'm just going to kind of flip through all of these really quickly for you. Here is workbook 4. Workbook 4 is going to cover the ED ending, and then we're moving into some of the vowel teams and syllable division. They include word sums here. Okay. Okay, we have workbook 5 now, going through the R-controlled vowels. So I think oftentimes workbooks get a bad rap, especially in the homeschool world. However, there really is a time and place for workbook. Should we be workbooking everything? No. However, if we are having to read and then comprehend what we're reading to make a match, or if we're having to read and then answer something by encoding, by spelling the word, we know that retrieval of those sounds to write the word down helps solidify the learning and move it from our short-term memory to our long-term memory. So the more opportunities a child has to practice that, the ability of having to pull the sounds out and write them down, the better it's going to stick. And so sometimes a workbook is the best approach for that. And these workbooks, I think, are also really well done, and they're very intentional. It's not a lot of fluff. Moving into workbook 6, we have more vowel practice here. We still have a lot of the same activities, just new content. Okay, we're going backwards. Yes, that might be confusing. All right. some syllable division practice. Let's look at workbook 7. These workbooks are about $13 to $15 each, so that makes the program pretty affordable in my opinion. If your manual is $32 and then you're maybe doing, a couple workbooks a year, you're looking at, not that expensive for a program altogether. ING ending. Okay. And the last level of the workbook is level 8. And with level 8, we are looking at beginning to work at affixes and some stable syllables here, different sounds of ch, root words and sums. So there's only a couple of pages here with the root words and sums. So this is not going to take you all the way into morphology. We do begin to have some word sorting embedded in the program at this point. I wish they had more of this earlier on. Okay, the other component we're going to look at are the leveled readers. I only have one set of the leveled readers. There are, I think, 3 or 4 sets of these. You can find these on eBay. In fact, if you notice, most of these I got off of eBay. I think I got the guide for $14 off eBay, and this leveled reader set, which is, looks a little rough on the edges, but still works, was about half off on eBay. So if this is a program you're looking into, definitely kind of do a search and a watch on eBay to see if materials will come up. If you purchase these new from Rainbow Resource, I think it's about $70 for this set, and so that would probably be the biggest investment component of the program, would be purchasing the leveled readers, which I highly recommend because these match up with the program and are going to be decodable. So if we look at these real quick, here's the first one. They are no frills. Okay, there's no color here, it's just black and white. And these are decodable based off of the lessons. So the words C and I and A have been taught as heart words. The rest of it is going to be decodable based off of the sounds the child has learned. They have some questions at the end for you to ask for comprehension. And then it tells us in the back of the book the different concepts that are covered in this book. So here are the different sounds that are included. And then here are heart words, caution words, red words, whatever you want to call them, that would need to either be taught or have already been taught before reading this book. And then some practice right here. It tells you on the back what it's featuring. If we go a little farther in, we have book 7. And again, it has that same format. Very simple. You could take these sentences from your book and use these for intentional copy work afterwards. If you're interested about intentional copy work, I highly recommend checking out Rooted in Language. You can use their intentional copy work program or methods with any curriculum, and that would be a really good way to tie in more writing. Okay, and again, we have our questions at the end and what it's introduced in the book, and it tells us what it's featuring. And then let's look at the last book in this level 1 series. So we have a kind of diary looking entry here with some little chapters, kind of my day, June 3rd, my day, June 4. Okay, we have the floss rule here. So this set will take you all the way up through that floss rule. So really all the way up through year 1 to year 2 almost of a foundational reading program, like 1.5 years. Okay. So that concludes my overview of Recipe for Reading. Now, real quick, I just want to share kind of why I like this program and who I recommend this for. If you're looking for a budget-friendly option, this is one of the programs I recommend, UFly and Recipe for Reading. In a lot of ways, I prefer Recipe for Reading because it has the workbooks for us and the books with it. However, UFly might have more guidance in terms of teaching it. So Recipe for Reading is a program that I have used since I was in the classroom, and it really is a nice option if you are coming from another program and your child is struggling. Let's say you did a particular program, you did it all the way through, your child was kind of getting it week by week, and then all of a sudden you're like, they have not retained any of that, right? Depending on the program, they might have, needed additional practice. Maybe the program wasn't a structured literacy program. It doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, we still need to jump in and assess and figure out where to review and where to instruct or where to begin instruction. If you are torn on how to do that and what that looks like, I do have a literacy assessments for homeschoolers course that walks you through all of those steps and figuring out where to kind of restart, or just to see where your child is in the first place. So once you figure out where your child is, this is a program that I often recommend to clients because you don't have to buy the whole, kit and caboodle. You can just grab this book, either $15 off eBay or 30 something bucks new, and you can, after pinpointing where to begin instruction, just jump into those lessons. You have your explicit instruction. If you're using a method where you have a language arts binder, you can start building those phonics and spelling pages and word study pages. You can, very bare bones with just this, teach your lesson, do your drills, and then have a sheet or a notebook provided for your student where you have the decodable words or the decodable sentences and phrases, and just work on those. So you can, start with a very bare bones and see how that goes. Maybe your child has gaps in spelling, but they're a fluent reader. So you can come back and kind of work on this by teaching them those solid rules at this point. You can decide to pull in the workbooks, right, and readers if you want to. Maybe you already have readers from whatever program you had been using, and you pull those back out for reinforcement, but are using this kind of as your reteaching spine. If you have any questions about Recipe for Reading, or, coming from another program perhaps and wondering why would I use this? How do I use this? Feel free to drop them in the comments below and I will try to get back to you. If you're looking at other foundational reading programs, make sure to check out my review on foundational reading programs for homeschoolers that includes Pinwheel, Logic of English, and All About Reading. And then I also have a new video up on UFly if you're interested in that. If you have other reading curricula that you would like me to consider reviewing, also send me an email and let me know. Maybe I can do that one next. Definitely make sure to subscribe and like this video if you found this helpful. Thanks, everyone.